Welcome. My name is Corinne Waldow. I'm the Economic Development Director for the Boulder Chamber. I want to thank you for joining us for this special industry-specific session that we're concentrating on events. We've heard recently you still have a lot of questions, need some clarifications, want to run through it one more time just to make sure you're clear on indoor and outdoor events. And if you're a realtor, for example, that just started doing open houses and now have questions, this is a really good time to ask those questions. We know that events depend on planning for the future, to know what's going to happen. In a lot of cases, we're not going to have those answers, but give you some idea of trends, epidemiological data, and some of the information that will help inform your decisions for the rest of this year. If you have any questions along the way, I had some emailed to me. If you have any questions along the way, please put them in the Q&A or chat box. And a reminder, the 4 o'clock session will not be every week for events, it's just this week. And you can join us at 3 o'clock every week for a general update on specifically, if there's a new mask order or like this past week, or if there's epidemiological trends or there's more information or you want to ask your questions, please join us on Wednesdays at 3 o'clock for those. But for this week, we have a special event session. I'm going to hand it over now to Jesse Rounds with Boulder County Public Health, who's going to represent. Usually you've seen, we probably had about 14 people on the calls, but he and Lane Drager, who will join us later, are going to represent Boulder County Public Health and try to answer your questions. And if your questions aren't answered, and I do capture your information and try to get them answered later and give you that back. But if you submit your question as anonymous, it's a lot harder to get back to you. And it's only me seeing it. So just letting you know that. At this time, go ahead, Jesse.
Thanks, Corinne, and thank you everyone for joining us. I'm gonna warn you in advance that my internet connection is slow, so I may have to turn off my camera, and I'm also gonna try and speak up because apparently I'm very quiet. So with that said, let's jump in. So in the session today, I really wanna save as much time as we can to answer your specific questions. I'll talk a little bit about the current health order and face covering orders. And notice I said orders there, plural. And then we'll jump into the event guidance, and I will just go through the events guidance as it's written, and a little bit about food service guidance, because I know there's a lot of crossover there. So that'll all be in here and we will go from there. So in terms of where we are still under Safer at Home in Boulder County, and that's Boulder County and all the municipalities. There have been 8 revisions to Safer at Home. We're under that 8th order, and we're going to remain there as long as it takes to get to the point where it's possible for us to move to protect our neighbors. Although I think a lot of people see this as a next step that'll change a lot of things. Protect Our Neighbors is just sort of a little bit looser version of Safer at Home. Some more participants allowed in events, for example, but in terms of protocols, it remains very much the same. So in terms of Protect Our Neighbors, it's the next phase of the public health response. And we have to apply to enter it. And I think that the reason I want to sort of harp on this is I'm not going to go into a bunch of information about the epidemiological situation because we just did that in our general update, but we are not in a position to apply for Protect Our Neighbors from an epidemiological standpoint, both in terms of our new cases and just general trends in all directions. With that said, also, we will not be applying for a variance. The governor has put a 2-week moratorium on variances, and we, again, do not qualify with our current numbers in terms of epidemiology, sorry. And we don't know when we're going to get there. Okay, louder. My dog's going to get into it soon. Face coverings. This is a hot topic right now. The face coverings, along with social distancing and hand washing, are our best bet for getting through this. And wearing a face covering, even when an order doesn't say you have to, is a good example. It sets a good example, and it also protects vulnerable populations. Now, about face covering orders in particular. The state face covering order is in effect for 30 days, and it may be extended. The Boulder County face covering order is in place indefinitely. And local ordinances that may be more strict, they have their own timelines. I'm not going to go into detail on those, but be aware that if you are located within a municipality or your facility is located within a municipality, you need to adhere to the municipality's face covering order, the county face covering order, and the state face covering order. And in all of those cases, whatever the strictest order is in the situation you're operating is the order that governs in that situation. In terms of face coverings and events, when you're indoors, you have to wear a mask at all times. When you're outdoors, a mask must be worn when you can't maintain 6 feet of social or physical distancing. And that's the easiest way to think about it for events. If it's indoors, everyone wears a mask, except when you're eating, you're allowed to take your mask off. But everyone, employees and guests, have to wear masks indoors. I want to point this out because it's going to come up a little later. With respect to the social distancing calculator, we've had some questions about how it works and why the numbers are the way they are. And the point of the social distancing calculator is to create a map of your space that sets a 144 square foot block around each person who might be there. And that's how we maintain that 6 feet social distancing. As you can see in the graphic here, it's 6 feet from you is a space in which someone can walk or move, and also maintain 6 feet from the person next to you. So the grid is much larger than a 6 by 6. It's a 12 by 12 grid in order to allow movement in the space. I really wanted to hit that because I think it comes up a lot, and it's also really important for event organizers to understand. In terms of information sources, we're going to go through the guidance, but I want to remind everyone that our website, boco.org/COVID-19 business, and the state's website, covid19.colorado.gov, have a ton of information about events, both indoor and outdoor, food service, and also the mask orders, how to work with people who don't want to wear a mask. And by work with, I don't mean work in your office or at your event with, because those people need to be wearing masks. But I mean, if someone comes to you and says, I don't want to be wearing a mask, the conversations you need to be having. These other sources on this slide are really, I think, great for information sharing. All the small businesses in Colorado, all the businesses in Colorado are experiencing the same questions, concerns, and confusion as you are. And that's why we're having these sessions, but it's also why all these sources of information are so great. They can provide so much on the ground experiential information about how they are applying the orders to their business. With that, I'm going to move to the regulations. This is going to be a lot of text on the slides. I apologize. Just really want to give you as much information as I can. So for events, this is the overall event guidance. If you have, and this is guidance you need to give to customers. Individuals who are sick need to remain at home. Vulnerable individuals are strongly recommended to stay at home because we can't guarantee their safety. Face coverings are required for all attendees. This is directly out of the protocols from the state. And this is something that I think we're encouraging larger events to do so that we can work with you. But I think it's really helpful for you as an event planner to do. Develop a plan for how you're going to screen your employees, how you're going to clean all of the bathrooms and high-touch surfaces, and how you're going to move people through the space in order to maintain those physical distances, as well as the flow that you need for your event. And also, and this is really important for epidemiology and for tracking outbreaks if and when they occur, we need you to collect information about guests so that if an outbreak occurs, if a number of people get sick, we can contact those people and trace the connections. And then this last thing, I've got another slide where it brings it up, I think, but performers are not included in your capacity limits. And as long as they are separated from your patrons, they need to be 25 feet at least, you can have live performances. In terms of life rates, so this is a specific kind of event. This is graduations, religious ceremonies, weddings, sort of big life events. There's specific guidance for you. Indoors, you're allowed to have up to 50 people or 50% of a venue's capacity. If you have an extra large room, you can have up to 100, but that limit is set by the social distancing calculator, which I mentioned before and is linked in this slide. You plug in the square footage of the room that you're talking about and how much fixed or movable furniture or obstacles are in the space, and it will tell you how many people can safely be in the space and meet the requirements of the public health order. Outdoors, life rights, you're allowed to have up to 175 people, again, using the social distancing calculator. If you have a very small outdoor space, you can't have 175 people. You need to maintain that 144 square foot grid around people, even outdoors. If you are planning to go over 175 people, please reach out to us. You can submit a plan to us. I will say that the county events, and I don't know exactly how this applies to life rights, but county events that need to be approved by our planning department, they are not approving any events over 175 people as a matter of policy. So if it needs county approval because it's using public roads, that's a limitation. Shouldn't affect life rights, but I just wanted to mention that. In terms of events, now this is not life rights, this is everything else. Your limits are set by the social distancing calculator for both indoor and outdoor events. For indoor events, you can have a maximum of 100 people. That is not 100 people and any space counts. It's that social distancing calculator, once again, that's gonna define how many people can fit in that space. That's also true for outdoor events where you can have up to 175 people. Just a little note here at the bottom, you do need to be sure that outside of the public health guidance, outside of the mask orders, you're still following all of the local laws and codes set forth by the municipality or county that you're working in. I mentioned that because of that, the county community planning and permitting level review that happens for certain types of events. That's an aside though. So I think just closing that out, if you have questions after this session and I'm not able to answer your question, or you want to dig into it before you email me, or email our group or Corinne, I definitely encourage you to check the state website for special events, both indoor and outdoor, and for life rights. It's the information is all there on the website. It's well organized. And I definitely know that there are situations where you're like, well, it says this, but what about this other situation? Happy to answer those questions. But I really recommend going and checking the state's website first. It's your best source of information. Now I'm going to go through some dine-in service food stuff because I know that a lot of events have food. I'm going to go through this, but definitely leaning on Lane, who has specific expertise here in case I go off course. For indoor dine-in services, different parties need to be 6 feet apart. That means your tables need to be at least 6 feet apart. And you need to be ventilating the space, cleaning it regularly. If you are having food at your event, I don't know, Lane, maybe you know, if you have food, I believe you need to follow the restaurant guidance for cleaning bathrooms, which means you need to clean your bathroom once an hour. So that's an added layer. Again, it's sort of like the masker thing. Think about all these as layering on top of each other. The more complex your event, the more sectors you're going to be bringing in here. And just sort of addressing the table thing, keeping parties that are related in the same household together is really important. You're going to want to do that at events. And your party sizes, so your table size, can't be larger than 8 people at a table at an event. And just some more details about efforts to reduce congregating. I think one thing that's really important for especially life rights that might be planning to have an event afterwards, 2 things. One, your life right is a separate event from your reception. That's really important. They fall under 2 different sets of guidance, and you need to be aware of that. At your reception, at your special event, you can't have communal seating. You can't have self-service buffets. And it's really important that at your event, people know where they're sitting. It's not just seat yourself, even at an event. You need to be seating people in designated spaces. And just, I think this is more advice than anything else, but floor markings really help people understand where they have to move through the space in order to maintain that distance between tables and other, service areas, that protects your employees and the customers. And then again, clearly marking closed tables, that's maybe more of a restaurant guidance, but I think it's really important. Signage everywhere in your establishment will really help your customers and your event attendees be safe. And in terms of cleaning and signage, like I said, signage is a great idea. Have a lot of it. Provide hand sanitizer throughout a venue, and then increasing that cleaning regime.
You turn off your camera.
Hey, Jesse, your audio, I think, went out, so I'm happy to do this. I don't know if you're still able to advance the slides. But it's one of the keys, I think Jesse mentioned this already, is when you're operating your event for the food service, you do fall under all the retail food rules. So one of those keys related to restrooms is cleaning those every hour. Also making sure that those restrooms have adequate spacing for people to socially distance within the bathrooms. So again, that they're able to maintain 6 feet, and that may mean closing off stalls and urinals to do that. Looks like Jesse couldn't do it, but I can share the PowerPoint. Let me.
Thanks, Lane.
Yep.
I'm back. Sorry about that, everyone. And sadly, I was very close to being done. Just reminder that when you're, if you have food at your event, it has to be sit down only. You can't have a bar space that people are congregating, where they're serving drinks and people are hanging out. Reducing those areas where there is congregation is really important. The red highlighted here, I'm sorry I kept this in. it is really important at events to recognize that the state order now requires when they are not eating, it requires that they be wearing a mask, not at an event where, you know, you can't just request. And with that, I just want to close out by reminding everyone about our Wednesday general updates and these special sessions, and then finish off with this note about how to get in touch with us, our email address and our call center. Call center is really great for, and maybe more effective for complaints. If you have questions about the orders, about the face covering order, about how Boulder County is interacting with businesses, email us at the covidbiz@bouldercounty.org address. And with that, happy to take questions.
All right, so Delane, did you have any thought, did you want to finish anything on what you were talking about either, or are you?
No, I think there were only a couple slides left, so I don't know if there's anything left on that slide that we were on. Well, maybe one thing that I would point out is for your reception, there may be a bar. That bar cannot be used for seating unless that space is designated only for seating. So that was in one of Jesse's slides, and it's important for that distinction. So there needs to be that social distancing. You can't have the bartender working and making drinks and then people sitting at the bars not with no masks on, drinking or eating. So that's an important piece that needs to be addressed for that event. And again, all the food activities and drinks have to fall under the retail food, so it needs to follow all those regulations. One I don't know that we talked about either that may obviously come up for an event is if there's a performer, so a musician, whatever, they need to be spaced at least 25 feet from the patrons. So that's an important additional spacing thing that needs to be thought about for your configurations.
And while they don't take away from your capacity number, they're going to take away from your square footage, especially indoor, that you have available, because within that 25 feet, you can't have people, because the research shows there may be, you know, the droplets from a performer may travel farther.
Yep.
That's a really good point. Yeah.
Can you go back to the slide that says the 8 or fewer?
Yes.
So on events, so I have a corporation coming in for an event, and they're not related. Are you really seating people at party sizes of 8 or fewer, or are you keeping them distance 6 feet apart or 12 feet apart?
So the 8 people is how many people can be at any given table. So yeah, if this is, I think the thought here is this is an event where you're now maybe again a life rights that then becomes a reception. Ideally, yeah, you're seating people from the same households at tables. And again, it doesn't mean you can just start putting random people together. So for restaurants, yeah, you can't have any communal seating where you just fill up the tables with, you know, there's 4 parties of 2 all go to the same 8-person table. So that's the maximum party size.
So translating this, a lot of our hotels and our event facilities, they depend heavily on you know, other events other than life right events. So they're talking about corporate trainings and corporate dinners and award ceremonies and those types of things. In that case, those people aren't related in most cases. And so how is the spacing going to be treated in that situation?
So the retail and the food service doesn't require that everyone's from the same household. So it's groups. So groups can't be larger than 8. So that doesn't mean it is only household. It can, you know, neighbors can go out to eat. That's not precluded here. So a corporation, you know, it doesn't prohibit you to seat fellows that work together at the same table. So you can do that. You just can't have more than 8. It would make sense to really think about how you're doing that though. So you're not just randomly putting a ton of people together. It doesn't allow for a seat yourself option. So someone needs to go through and organize and figure out where people are sitting and then assign them the seats.
And I think one of the confusing things from some of the event planners is if food's not being served, let's just say it's a training, are they following the food service guidelines at that point with the seating, or are they just following the event, which requires the 144 square feet and social distancing?
Well, again, it depends on what it is. So there's a whole lot of things that fall under events. You know, again, life rights events include graduations. So that is largely a seated event. So we need to maintain 6 feet of social distancing. So that's meaning you're going to set up your seats so that people are separated, and, you know, groups, if it's a family, are separated from other families. But it doesn't necessarily require that 144 square feet that Jesse showed, because it's not an activity-based event. You know, the people are all seated and watching. So if that's kind of how the corporate event is, where everybody's seated and watching a presentation and not moving around and mingling, you need to maintain the social distancing. So again, you would set up seating to accommodate that. Again, food service is its own separate thing when you're providing food service. So it would not be, I think, okay to just set up round tables and stick 8 random people at those tables to watch presentations. You're going to have to think of a different seating way to accommodate that.
Maybe a classroom style where they're distanced out in all directions in providing that type of seating, which does take up more space than sometimes a rounds.
Yeah.
The experts are actually the people listening to this call.
Yeah.
So we have a few questions about mask wearing. Plan my events in my time, but they know their square footage. So you say mask wearing while not eating or drinking. That's in the food service part of it. Does that apply to outdoor seating and events as well?
Yes.
Yes.
And with the new mask order, just basically think that you need to have a mask on, and that your patrons need to have a mask on, that they need to be seated, there needs to be social distancing. So our events are going to look a lot differently moving,
I think
right now.
This calls back to me, to mind, Corinne, in the last session, you prompted me to mention that these orders are stacked on top of each other. So when you're outdoors, the state order doesn't require you to be wearing a mask, but you are not maintaining 6 feet of social distancing necessarily. The county order requires you to wear a mask, and these orders, the public health order requires that patrons be wearing masks in an event. So I think that's really important that there's this, think about all of the layers that you need to be paying attention to as you plan these events.
Mm-hmm. And as so we have a couple questions that came in about who's responsible. So you have event facilities and you have event planners, and we have both on the call. And so you have to maintain a list of people. You need to, make sure that there's seated, the people are seated and not have self-seating. You need to make sure the bathrooms and all these things are followed. Is it the event facility, or is it the event planner? Or is that who's ultimately responsible, and how should they work together?
I think it's a mutual responsibility. So I think it's really important to spell out who's handling what aspect. So again, there could be contracts involved. That's definitely a good place to be very clear about who's doing what. Ultimately, I would say probably both could be responsible if it's being asked from sort of a litigation standpoint. As far as compliance with the regulations, again, it could potentially be both. So the facility that's hosting this or allowing this to happen needs to make sure that whoever's there is following the laws, and then whoever's actually doing the event certainly needs to follow the laws as well. So, we just want people to have the information so they can run their events successfully and safely. But ultimately, it's probably the responsibility lies with both parties.
So, because in a contract tracing situation, if there was a potential outbreak, it may start at the facility, but they'll have to contact the event planner and say, we need to know the people that were there and who was seated around or served by or whatever these individuals, and to be able to provide that information, and having that understanding that you both might need that information is important.
Yeah.
Same thing with, bathrooms may not be the event planner necessarily. It might be the facility to make sure that the bathrooms are clean. But it's also on the event planner to make sure that they're continually, that everybody's continuing to follow the protocols and the orders. Are there any other questions out there? I know, we have a limited group, and Jesse and Lane are pretty good at answering questions on the fly. If anybody wants to raise their hand and ask a question, they can. This is a smaller group, so we're able to do that. So we've seen numbers go up. And, a lot of these people weren't on the last call, but we've seen numbers go up as far as cases. And, there's been some changes. Bars were closed again. Now you can't serve alcohol after 10 o'clock in a bar setting, or is that in any setting? Actually, that's my,
yeah.
Any setting?
Mm-hmm. Okay,
so you can't serve alcohol past 10 o'clock in any setting. So that would be something that would be new for this group as well. What if our numbers keep going up? What are the next steps for counties in the state?
I mean,
go ahead.
Yeah,
Jess.
sorry, go ahead, Lane.
These are all speculation. So obviously we've seen things start to move backwards in certain aspects because of trends. So again, like what you pointed out, so that certainly is a possibility that the orders that have been relaxed could become more stringent. That's certainly not what we want to see. So I think you're seeing the state put a mask order in place to try to prevent that. You're seeing other counties do that. So I think that is the trend, is that we're trying to encourage our communities to really play the role that they need to play to keep these numbers down. So we can do only so much, but if people don't take their personal responsibility, we know masks have become very politicized. People want to, really say that it's their right to not have to wear a mask. And the reality is it causes disease when people don't. So you can be shedding virus for 2 days before you become symptomatic and start to feel sick. So people who have no idea that they're ill can be shedding virus. But if they're wearing a mask and then people around them are wearing a mask, the efficacy of that dramatically reduces risk for people getting sick. So it's a very simple step for people to do. Same with washing hands and staying 6 feet away. These are all things that are within everyone's control that can help really address this disease. But people not doing that, and we start getting into battles of what are people's rights. We're not being productive, and we certainly are going to see more and more problems. And that's what's happening throughout the state.
We've seen some great creativity. I mean, I know we have some venues on the call today that, realize that, in the next 4 months, a lot may not change, and we hope that we don't go backwards, but a lot may not change. So that business that you were trying to book in October may need to look differently. So there might be live. I know we have a venue on here that does automatic live streaming, of events to provide smaller numbers in person, but then, give access to those. So we might need to find some creativity as we move forward to keep some of these businesses open in the capacity that they're currently in. I think this question we got in the last session, but I think it's a good one to bring up in this session as well. What are some best practices? It's hard to wear a mask 8 to 10 hours a day. What are some best practices around mask wearing that can make it so people have more comfort in wearing them and are wearing them correctly because they are more comfortable?
I mean, I think, and I'm gonna steal from both Corinne and Lane here from the last session, but I'll start where I started last time, which is find a mask that's comfortable for you. There are a ton of varieties, and you should seek them out. But I think otherwise, taking breaks during the day, going outside, going for a walk, are situations where you don't have to be necessarily wearing a mask, and that's a great way to give yourself that break. And in terms of getting it fitted right, there are tons of options out there. There are videos that show how to put on a mask and how to wear it comfortably for a long time. I mean, there are definitely people who have been wearing masks for 8 hours and more since the beginning of this pandemic. And that's not necessarily to say like everybody should do it. I'm just saying that there are resources out there to get at this, because obviously this is a question that's come up for a lot of people.
And you know, I just, my personal opinion, find a mask that's comfortable, and have multiple of them. Always probably have more than one on you, especially if you're in food service or in the fitness industry or one of those or events, and it gets wet or soiled or dirty, you need to have another one to be able to replace it with in a lot of cases. And if it's comfortable, it's a lot easier to wear. Those ones that are uncomfortable, where the material just is not, it doesn't fit your face correctly, may make it harder to wear. You know, I heard a recommendation on the Boulder Valley School District call yesterday that if you're not used to wearing it, maybe wear it at home at times. You know, have your children wear it, you know, to get used to wearing it, because if it's not a natural thing, if you're not in the healthcare industry and you're not used to wearing them, you may need to build up some of your time on that. Do we have any other, oh, and Lane, did you have anything to add on that one?
I don't think you guys covered it well.
All right, do we have any other questions? I appreciate you guys just running through this one more time. I think that in the last couple of weeks, events has been combined with hospitality and restaurants, and to just say, okay, this is what an event looks like. This is, you know, what you would follow, I think is important for the people that are on this call. All right, I don't see any more questions.
I think the other thing that I know a big challenge for events, you know, especially life rights where there is some reception afterwards, is the other sort of prohibition is, you know, dance floors or other sort of, you know, activities. So we understand that's really difficult, but any activities that are kind of encouraging people to mingle and really no longer social distance are not allowed. So that's unfortunate, but that's another piece of it.
Well, let's clarify that though. So if you have entertainment and you have a band and people are swaying in their chairs, they're not getting up and dance floor, they're not they're not convening, they're not dancing together, there's not intermingling of groups, people can have fun. They can still enjoy the entertainment. It's just that we're asking that they're not doing it in an intermingled fashion, correct?
You can't have a packed dance floor.
Yep.
Yeah. I've been called the footloose monitor lately, apparently, but there's the ability to have fun and to be creative in how we have it. It's just that the traditional dance floor at a wedding is a tough one.
Well, and I actually have heard of more people doing virtual things, virtual wedding receptions and parties and things like that. So there's, I think, a whole niche of people that are helping facilitate those so that people really are still enjoying themselves. Again, it's certainly a challenge. It's not like what we all would like to have, but it's, you know, it is where we're at right now.
Well, the virtual reception lines, as you would think of it as well. All right, I don't see any other questions. I want to thank you both for taking this extra time today to kind of walk through events. Again, anybody on this call has questions, covidbiz@bouldercounty.org, or you can just, you know, respond to the email I send out, and I usually forward it on to Jesse or Lane if I don't have an already prescribed answer or a link to a resource. Continue to join us on Wednesdays at 3 o'clock if we see any big changes for this particular industry or hospitality. We can call a special industry specific session in the future as well. At this time, thank you guys, and thank everybody for joining us.
Thanks, Corinne. Thanks, Lane. Bye, everybody.